So our task, Jordan and I received a request from National Government Association a while back to create a library of key performance indicators for state governments to be able to assess their efforts for targeted violence prevention. So once again, that is for state governments at the state level to assess their targeted violence prevention efforts. And we eagerly discussed and then very quickly realized, oh yes, that reminds me that we're talking at the state level, but for those of you, many of you in the room care about individual level programs and how to assess those, RAND Corporation, where they're used again, and still has a tool of countering violent extremism tool you can find online if you're interested. So we had discussed and we got really excited about it, to propose KPI metrics, but then we realized that to propose metrics, we need to know what it is people are trying to evaluate, what state level efforts exist, what strategy are we trying to help people evaluate. And once we look closer at it, we realize that actually there's definitely not a uniform approach to state level targeted violence prevention efforts, that the level to which such efforts are comprehensive varies from state to state quite drastically, that there is a challenge, as many of you mentioned today, there is a challenge of defining what are successful targeted violence prevention efforts. Is it lavish goal of reducing targeted violence in the state? How do we measure that? So instead of going directly to identifying metrics and ways to measure certain indicators, we have to go back and develop a framework. What would states do at the state, and what would be an appropriate type of activity or a series of activities for states to engage in at their level? And to understand that, if we could go back for a second, please, Jordan, to understand that we engage in interviews and literature review, and this is where we got to know so many of you really well and spoke with many of you, to understand what it is that states should do or can do within their capacity. Then, once we developed the framework, we identified possible indicators of success, and then actually went back to interviews and literature to identify metrics and ways to measure them. So ultimately, through these conversations and review of the literature, we came out with an understanding that states should play a facilitator role as a convener and player or coordinator of many different efforts that are directed toward targeted violence prevention. From these conversations, we felt strongly that the framework for developing should take a public health model at the center, should feature a public health model at the center, while individual acts of violence may happen, committed by individuals. There's obviously a clear sign that roots of this violence is often located within the communities and so on. And we made sure to express, and I hope the states heard us, that the library, the framework that we are creating, that you will see is very comprehensive. It's not prescriptive. We understand that various challenges from political will to resources in implementing a very comprehensive framework. However, it is in my heart of hearts, I would believe that it's that level of comprehensiveness that is needed, not only to prevent individual acts of violence, but I think, as Mia mentioned, to create healthier communities at large that would make violence less likely. And that's exactly, next slide please, that's exactly what our goal was. And that's the mission that we set for our framework, creating communities that are well equipped to prevent targeted violence. We put public health model at the center of it, from primordial stage to tertiary, which we'll talk about today. And we also added 2 more phases, preparation phase and monitoring phase, to make sure that the community, the state is prepared to receive the programming, the intervention and prevention programming that states are supporting or developing, and to ensure that there is a long-term plan for sustainability, accountability, and evaluation and learning. We developed 11 goals across these different stages, and then we organized each of these stages, next slide please, as a logic model that went from goals to objectives to tasks, And then the third is on backwards on outputs, outcomes, and ultimately impact. What are we hoping to achieve? And these outputs, outcomes, and impact are what we call the performance indicators. And then we ask ourselves, what would be good indicators that an output, outcome, or impact were achieved, and how, what are the ways, what ways have been validated to measure them, or if they do not exist, can we come up with common sense ways to assess these? So Jordan will speak about particularly tertiary comparison as a of this framework.
Thank you, Katja. So to continue our infomercial for this piece this product that we developed for the National Governance Association, as Katja made, there only one section deals with tertiary prevention. So what we thought would be most relevant to discuss that component today. So tertiary prevention, we identify as two components. The first one that hasn't really been discussed here today is the notion of community healing and making sure that we don't spiral into a cycle of violence in the wake of a terrorist incident or an incident of targeted violence or excessive spree of hate crimes. And so that is at the community level a very important component of tertiary prevention. But today, because so much what we're focused on is on the individual level, we'll be giving you some examples of KPIs that we identified from actually helping individuals re-enter society after they've been convicted or involved in the criminal justice system for incidents of targeted violence. So this is the full logic model. There's not going to be a test on it, but just want to show you that objectives, tasks, outputs, and outcomes. Next slide. So the objectives for tertiary prevention in the post-release space, we identified 4 right here. I will not read them. We then identified 7 tasks. Here are 3 examples of tasks that state governments could do at having those 5 objectives. What are the set tasks that follow from those objectives? This is an example of 3 of them. And then after they have the task and they want to measure, okay, did we actually achieve the task? That is an output. So one sample output from the task identified is, do we want the states should make sure that the incentives were developed and the funding was secured for both in prison and out of prison reentry, not de-radicalization, but disengagement programs. So once we know what the output is, how do we then measure that the output was actually achieved? And very basically, has state funding been allocated, and has it been allocated at the level at which it was assessed was necessary? This is not rocket science. This is very basic. It is a logic model. Each one flows logically, one thought to the next. But we understand that a lot of states and a lot of entities don't have the bandwidth necessarily to develop their own list of metrics. So we are developing this list for you, even though, again, this is not rocket science. One element flows from the next. So now that we have our output measures, our outcome measures are making sure that the programs that they actually have effective programs in place, and then later we'll have impact measures to make sure that folks are actually not engaging in recidivism. But in terms of outcomes, how do you measure the fact that these programs are actually in place? Well, you assess what number of prisons have these programs, what percentage of the total of prisons actually have these programs, how many programs do these prisons offer, how much money has been allocated to these prisons, what is the number of people who are actually participating in these programs, and what is the percentage of folks who are eligible to be participating in these programs are actually participating. Similarly, do these programs incorporate best practices, evidence-based approaches? And that could be done by assessing, observing the programs, or discussing with experts, such as those of us in the field, pat ourselves on the back, to assess how evidence-based these programs are. So that is just a taste of this tool. Like I said, this is the infomercial version. The tool can be accessed here. This is QR code 1.0. This is the actual link to our tool. Is available online. It is very long. It is very comprehensive. And then again, this is aimed at governments, state governments, but also local governments could absolutely take a look at this menu of options and benefit significantly from it. And last slide, please. If you have any questions or like a hands-on tutorial, please reach out to me and or Katya. I am no longer at RAND, but I'm still happy to promote the tool. I am now at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, where I was told if I want to come here on work time, I need to say that Institute for Strategic Dialogue was actually a partner with McCain on the PPN network. A lot of the materials that you'll find on the McCain website were developed by my now colleagues at ISD. So we are very proud of McCain and supporting McCain. And thank you. With that, I don't know if we have time for questions.
You got 5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes, so Katya and I are happy to answer any questions you might have. I'm usually the one to ask questions, but I don't really have any questions.
It was great to work with you guys. What was the most interesting finding you had after you interviewed all your stakeholders?
I think the first interesting finding or surprising finding was that there is not this comprehensive summarized framework for what states could do already for states to use that. So that was a bit of surprise. Another interesting finding was working with states, talking with states, just how excited people were to collaborate across different agencies, figuring their ways out for doing so. But it was heartening to see that there is really strong understanding that this collaboration is needed. And then also for me, exciting was to see the recognition of the public health approach to violence prevention, even though I find that most states have focused on secondary prevention, threat assessment, threat management teams. But at least there is an understanding that the problem is not always with individuals, cannot be fixed by always going to individuals, but kind of going to a broader society as well.
Thank you. And Patty, thank you for lending your voice to this tool, and thank you to many others in the room lending your voice to this tool. I think my biggest surprise finding was before we started the interviews, we thought this process was going to be very straightforward. We take every state's targeted violence prevention strategy and then develop metrics based on the things that they identified. And we quickly realized that most states, almost all states, don't have a targeted violence prevention strategy. So we had to help them develop one. I think that was the biggest finding. And then the other big finding was the distinction between primordial prevention and primary prevention. It's not a distinction that is frequently made, but it, to me, is critically important. And we kind of split the baby on this because we kept debating: is primary prevention building healthy communities and building healthy individuals, or is it education and letting people understand what to do if they see something, say something? And so we split the baby by saying primordial prevention is about building healthy individuals, building healthy communities, and primary prevention is about educating the public and educating relevant stakeholders on seeing something and then saying something.
And Brett still helped us split that baby.
Yeah,
He was doing the splitting.
That was Thank you very much. We are more than happy to answer questions all the time.